Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. The world is standing on the edge, on the very edge of a financial event unlike anything we've seen before. We need to discuss this. A currency crisis, global in scale, is looming, and it does not appear that it will be limited to just one or two struggling economies like before. We're talking about the largest, most powerful economies in the entire world being at risk. The warning signs are flashing red. 7 major countries, Canada, France, Italy, Japan, Spain, the United Kingdom, and the United States, are all now carrying government debt that exceeds the size of their entire economies. Oh, and by the way, these aren't developing nations. These are G7 countries. Together, they now form what some are already calling the D7. Never before in modern history have so many of the world's economic giants been so deep in debt, while interest rates have been so high. This is a combination with no precedent and no playbook. The simple truth is that these countries borrowed heavily during the global financial crisis of 2008, then again during the pandemic, but unlike during past crises, they're now trying to manage their massive debts in a high interest rate environment. In 2020, borrowing was essentially free. Many of you might recall that, and now it is anything but free. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the D7's net debt minus financial assets, sits around 100% of GDP. That's never happened at a time when central banks have jacked interest rates up by hundreds of basis points in just a few years. Borrowing has become dramatically more expensive, and it is creating a pressure cooker inside global credit markets. Investors are already growing uneasy, and cracks have started to form. The problem isn't just the size of the debt, it is how quickly the cost of that debt is rising, and that to me is the biggest issue here. Governments are rolling over trillions in existing bonds. Every time they do that, they're paying significantly more in interest. In the United States, yields on 30-year Treasury bonds are approaching 5%, thus pushing the U.S. Treasury to borrow more on the short term just to avoid locking in those brutal rates. And here's where things start getting quite dangerous. If markets lose faith in a country's ability to repay its debt, which arguably they have already started to lose faith, or even if they suspect that inflation or devaluation might be coming, investors begin to sell. And when they sell a country's bonds, they also dump, its currency. And this is how currency crises begin. Devaluations have happened before. This is not a new thing. Let's think about France in the 1950s, the UK in the 1960s, and then Italy in the 1990s. But those were isolated instances, and today, any one country pulling that lever could trigger a chain reaction across global markets. Because here's the dark reality. The D7 countries, or the G7 countries, if you'd like to call them that still, they owe money in their own currencies. And that means that they can choose to inflate their way out of trouble, of course, which involves printing more money to shrink the real value of their debt. It is a political shortcut that avoids raising taxes, which is a quite unpopular move politically, would not be accepted or tolerated, or slashing spending, again, a quite unpopular move. So that is how they handle that. But it comes at a steep price. That price includes things like inflation, falling living standards, collapsing investor confidence, and eventually a run on the currency. When that happens, central banks typically try to defend their currencies by selling off their reserves. But here's another problem. The central banks of the G7 countries hold each other's currencies. So when one goes down, they all feel it. The system is tightly interlinked. And once a devaluation starts, it rarely stays in just one country. In 1967, the UK devalued the pound. Within months, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland followed suit to keep their exports competitive. It is a classic domino effect, and this is exactly what we're seeing right now. The same thing happened in Asia, for example. In 1997, Thailand devalued, then South Korea followed suit, and Indonesia followed suit too. Back then, these crises were mostly confined to emerging markets. Today, it's the core of the global economy that's in danger, and developed nations are now at risk. Let's imagine the United States moves first. Whether by design or by market pressure, the dollar falls sharply. Immediately, countries like Canada, Mexico, and even China may face a choice: follow suit or risk pricing themselves out of global trade. At the same time, institutional investors, who of course manage trillions of dollars, will likely be forced to revalue their portfolios. If one major currency drops, the rest look too risky. They sell broadly. Bond markets in Europe, Asia, and North America take simultaneous hits. But here's where this becomes more than just another financial crisis. In the Eurozone, countries share a central bank, and not all of them are equally prepared. If inflation begins spreading in the Eurozone, again, political tensions could explode. Sound familiar, right? Well, that's because that happened in Greece in 2010. Only this time, the numbers involved would be exponentially larger. So what happens to the average person when currencies start to collapse? That is the big question, and I'm sure that's something that all of you are thinking right now. Imported goods become more expensive. Interest rates spike, mortgage payments soar, retirement accounts shrink, unfortunately, and for people living paycheck to paycheck, groceries and gas become daily financial threats. The IMF is already projecting tighter budgets and slower growth moving forward. Trade tensions are rising, as you know if you watch my videos, and without serious structural reforms, the G7 countries have few options left. That's the point we're in right now. The debt is too large to grow out of. The politics are too broken to cut spending, and raising taxes in this environment would only risk tipping economies into a complete and utter disaster. That leaves one path: devaluation, either deliberate or forced. When currencies fall, they take everything with them. Remember, they do take everything with them. Wages, savings, investments, trade. The world isn't ready for a simultaneous collapse of its most trusted currencies, but that is exactly what we're heading toward. The Asian and Russian currency crises of the 1990s shocked the world, but will this time we are actually being warned and we need to prepare. The question now is whether governments will act before markets force their hand, and if they don't, well, the fallout will be global and it will be historic. Let me know what you think about this topic in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you, and let us know if you're doing anything to prepare. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit like, subscribe, and also remember to give me a follow on Substack and Patreon. I would love to see you there too. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you back here on my channel tomorrow. Bye for now.